This is the Canon R8 and I've been using it for about a year for video work, and I think it's a really great camera for the price. And if you're in the range for about $1,000 video camera, this is a great choice. So let's get into it. All right, we'll do this pros and cons style because I think it's better to end on a good note. The first con with this camera for video is that it doesn't have a video focused body, which makes sense because this is just a photography style camera, very small, has a viewfinder. It doesn't have any tally lights. It only has one record button and it does not have a fan. On the note of the fan, it hasn't really been a huge issue for me overheating. A lot of people have complained about this camera overheating and stuff. One time I was in a pretty hot garage filming cars, and I was in 4K 60 and the temperature gauge was starting to climb up a little, just to let me know. And I did shut it off for a little bit and let it cool down, but it did not overheat. But it definitely could, and I don't live in a super hot environment either, so that definitely might be an issue if you live in like Florida or something, but not a huge issue for me personally. All right, the next con about this camera is the codecs. So you really don't get a lot of choices when you're working in video. There's like 2 different 4K modes. I just use the higher quality one, but I'm pretty sure it records in long GOP, which is super annoying to edit with, especially if you have like a bunch of short clips kind of spliced together and you're doing more complicated edits or doing a lot of heavy color grading. Yeah, long GOP bogs down my CPU on my computer a ton, and it's a little annoying to work with. You more so want your GPU to be used when you're video editing. The CPU, it's not as smooth when you're scrubbing a lot through the timeline. So definitely not a deal breaker. I mean, obviously I've worked with this camera for like over a year. It's annoying. You don't get a lot of choices. All right, the next con for this camera is that it does not have good battery life. It just has the small Canon LPE17 batteries, which are, they don't last very long. But the thing that annoys me more is that the battery indicator on the screen just has those 4 bars. It doesn't actually tell you how much is left or how long is left. So like I'll be at 4 bars and I'm shooting away and I'm like, oh yeah, I got like full battery. And then it drops to half suddenly and I'm like, whoa. And then 5 minutes later, it's blinking red at me. So it's very inconsistent too. So it's kind of hard to gauge where your battery is at. I'd say you maybe get like 50 minutes to an hour out of each of the batteries. In like a real world use scenario, like you're, changing shots, but you have the camera on, you're setting up. So I'd expect about an hour. I'm not sure how long it lasts, like purely recording time, but yeah. So not great battery life. I usually have this thing rigged up to a V-mount if I'm doing handheld or it's on a tripod anyways, but yeah, on the gimbal, you need to switch it out if you're like doing more longer stuff. All right, the next con is that this camera and the sensor has a very kind of video-like image. You want a more filmic touch, right? Like when you're doing filmmaking, you want that more soft, kind of just filmic look. And it has a kind of a harsh highlight roll-off and not great dynamic range. It's like sharp though, not necessarily sharp in the good way. I'd say the sharpness is not a bad thing. I've turned it down all the way that you can in the camera. I've turned the sharpness way down. So the sharpness isn't a huge issue. I'd say more just like the highlight roll-off is not great and the dynamic range. There was a scene where I was shooting myself inside of a car and I was trying to expose for myself, but it would just blow out the background, right? I couldn't find that balance exactly. So just because there isn't very much dynamic range, I think there's only maybe like 11 stops in this. That could be totally wrong, but it's not a ton. So that's definitely a con for me, is the video-like sensor image. All right, the next con is super nitpicky, but whenever I attach an external monitor to this thing, the Flippy screen goes off. Like you can't use it at all. You can have them both on at the same time, but when you try to record, it says, oh, card recording not available while you have HDMI out. It's like, what? It's super frustrating because, sometimes you're working with the big monitor, but then, oh, you want to tap on something to focus, the camera got off focus on something and you want to tap on it and pull focus on something. Well, you can't do that because the screen is just off. So that's super annoying. Even more expensive cameras like the Sony FX3 does that. Like the little screen turns off when you attach to a big screen, and it's super annoying. The only cameras I know of that don't do that are the Canon C50, which I'm shooting on right now, and the Canon R5C as well does not do that. So it's super helpful having the little screen. You can dial in stuff, you can tap your focus. That's super helpful, I think, and camera manufacturers need to start making both screens available. And I don't hear anyone talking about this either. I think it's a huge issue. All right, let's move into the pros for this camera. So this camera has a lot of pros for the price. All right, the first pro for this camera actually goes back to the sensor. So we said I didn't like the, highlight roll-off dynamic range, but it is a 6K sensor. You don't get access to the 6K, you're stuck in 4K, but you can tell it's a big boy camera, right? When you put it up on a screen, it's like, whoa, like, okay, this is a real camera. It definitely holds up in that regard. It has a nice sharpness from that 6K, and it has a good image for what it is, $1,000 camera, a 6K sensor, that's pretty dang good. All right, the next pro is that this camera has uncropped 4K 60. So I will name a camera that does not have that. The Sony FX2 has a 1.5 times crop in 4K 60, and that camera is over double the price of this camera. So yeah, not having a crop in 4K 60 is awesome. You don't have to reframe, it doesn't mess up your shot. You just switch it into 60 and you got your slow-mo. It's not downsampled in 60 frames per second, so it's a little softer, not quite as clean of an image as your 24 or your 30, but what do you expect? So it's just great having that uncropped 4K 60. That's a feature that much more expensive cameras don't have, so that's a win. All right, my next pro for this camera is this thing has amazing autofocus. Like, it has Canon's newest dual pixel autofocus too, and it just doesn't miss. Like, it's really reliable. It has the people detect, the animal detect, and the vehicle detect, and the auto mode. So if you're shooting like a variety of things, you got cars, you got people, dogs, whatever, it'll just auto recognize those. So that's super helpful. And then of course, if you need to change your subject, you just tap on the little screen. But yeah, the autofocus is great. Even in low light, it works really well. No complaints about this camera's autofocus. What will hold back your autofocus though is what lens you're using. So if you're using like a higher end L series lens, like my 24-70, you're gonna have no issues. The autofocus is absolutely great. It's when you use, something like the 50mm STM lens, which I'm using right now, the 50mm f1.8 STM. Yeah, the autofocus is very kind of jumpy and it's slow. When you're doing video though, you're not really looking for like the fastest autofocus. You're really looking for more so that smoothness. And yeah, the higher end lenses, it's definitely more smooth. But to kind of hack the smoothness, what I do is I go into the menu and I just turn down the autofocus speed by a lot. And that really helps just slow it down. It's gonna be slow, but it's not that big of a deal in video, right? You're not a photographer that needs to instantly snap onto something. It's like, no, you want to emulate that manual focus pull. So even on the little 50mm, I can get a pretty smooth autofocus if I just slow down the speed a ton. It's going to get rid of that jumpiness because that's definitely not cinematic. All right, the next pro for this camera is a huge one for me. This camera has like really good low light for what it is. It doesn't have a dual base ISO. It has a base ISO of 800 in C-Log3. But man, I've pushed this thing up to 12,800 ISO and it honestly holds up. Like, there's definitely noise, but with a little bit of noise reduction, you can get it super clean and it's totally usable. In ISO 1600 and 3200, like, I don't even notice the difference, that I don't see any noise. It doesn't break the image whatsoever. 6400 is definitely totally usable as well. Yeah, it's really good. So a 24 megapixel sensor, it looks really nice. The low light is super helpful. I've often shot a lot in 12,800 ISO because I just shoot, wherever I am, mostly natural light. And yeah, it's awesome bumping it up if I want to stop down the aperture a little bit more and get, some more in focus. Having that extra light that I can just rely on is amazing. So super impressed with the low light capabilities of the Canon R8. That's definitely a pro for me. All right, the next pro is just the size of this camera. So, you know, we said that it doesn't have a cinema body, which is a con, but with that does come, it's like super small. It fits everywhere, right? Super thin, and I have a cage on it right now, but every time I take the cage off, I'm like, oh my gosh, like this thing is smaller than my hand. It's really small. And it's super discreet, right? Like, you know, you just look like some tourist with your camera here, but then you're, you know, down at the hip getting like super cinematic footage and no one knows with your little 50mm lens. So it's pretty low key, which I definitely like. So yeah. All right, the next pro is this camera has C-Log 3. So a lot of people say, you know, oh, like C-Log 2 is way better, C-Log 3 sucks, you know, S-Log 3 is way better. And that's true, C-Log 3 and S-Log 3 are better. They have more dynamic range, but you know, it's never gonna be the thing that's holding you back, right? Like, I'd rather have a log curve than not have a log. Like, I'd rather have a log mode than not have one. So it's really nice having C-Log 3. There's really never been a situation where I'm like, oh yeah, dude, if I had C-Log 2 right now, this shot would be so much better, because that's just not true. It's awesome. It's flexible enough for me. It's very easy to grade. Like, if you just need a quick turnaround, you pop it into DaVinci, do a quick Rec 709 conversion, and you've got a really nice image. Maybe just turn down the exposure a little bit, but it's really natural right out of the gate. Good contrast, good colors. I've even done I do a lot of heavy color grading. Like, I add a lot of effects and just manipulate my footage a lot, because I like to do that. It's fun. I like to get the best image I can, and it really doesn't like break on me. It's nice, and yeah, I love having C-Log 3. All right, the next pro is a feature that much more expensive cameras do not have. I will name two cameras right now that don't have this feature: the Sony FX2 and the Sony FX3. And this feature is false color. Like, this is the most useful exposure tool, way more useful than zebras or histogram or like waveform. Waveform's pretty good, but false color is my go-to exposure, and this little camera, $1,000, has it. And a $4,000 FX3 doesn't even have false color. Like, what? And neither does the FX2. It's like, I don't understand this. So that's another feature that this camera, you know, it's beating out competitors that are not even in its price range, right? It's like a quarter of the price of the FX3, and it has false color, which is awesome because I use it all the time. It's great to judge exposure. You just want to always make sure you're viewing it in the log curve. It doesn't actually let you view false color in the 709 where you're using view assist. But you have to be careful when you're outputting to an external monitor, because you want to make sure you're viewing your false color in log mode. So false color, huge win for this camera. All right, my last pro for this camera is gonna be a hot take. So I think it's a pro that this camera does not have IBIS, in-body image stabilization. Yeah, so when I first picked up this camera, right, I took some shots with it. I was like, oh, it's like terribly shaky. It's so bad. So I was like, oh, I need a gimbal. And a gimbal is a very specialized tool. Like, you use that when you want very smooth, like, oh, you're following someone, you're in a movie. It's a specialized tool. But when we do handheld, we're going for that like natural kind of cinematic shakiness, right? It's not jittery, but it's like you can tell a human's operating it. And I think it's dumb when people are like, oh, it doesn't look like, you know, it's not ultra smooth, it doesn't have IBIS, it's terrible. Like, no. So this camera taught me how to actually properly hold a camera and, you know, make sure you're getting smooth, natural looking handheld shots. And people say, oh, but I don't want to rig up my camera. You don't need to rig up your camera. This lens does not have this lens does not have image stabilization. This is a 50mm. I can literally just get a side handle. That's all you really need. Just get a side handle, pop it on, and then you're getting that pressure from both sides, pushing the camera in, and it's gonna make your shots way smoother. Or the same if you have a top handle and you're holding it from the bottom. Yeah, that's a great way to smooth out your shots. I will say a lot of the RF lenses as well are stabilized. 3 of my zooms, or all the zoom lenses are stabilized, and one of my primes is as well. It's super useful. I don't really think you need IBIS or in-body stabilization if you're under 35 millimeters. It's totally usable with just a side handle, and you're just, you know, it's all about technique. Above 35 millimeters, it's definitely nice to have some image stabilization in the lens if you're going to be like kind of walking and stuff at a tighter angle. But I like having a fixed sensor because I know Canon's cameras with IBIS have terrible wobble, like the R5 Mark II, R6 Mark III. Yeah, I don't like to look at those cameras. Nothing takes me more out of the cinematic universe than like some corner wobbles. But other brands do have good IBIS, like Sony and Lumix. They have very, very good IBIS. The only thing I don't like about it though is just that, like, when you are doing that more kind of like shaky or moving a lot more, you'll see like the sensor, it does this like very quick jitter, like shifting. And I think that's very uncinematic too. Like I don't like that. I'd rather just have good old shakiness than this like micro compensation. So yeah, I like a fixed sensor way more. You know, if you're mounting it on a car, it's not going to be jiggly. It's going to look natural, and you just got to learn how to use the camera properly. So people complain about IBIS. Yeah, grow up, learn how to use a camera, learn how to hold it, and get some good footage. So yeah, that's my hot take on IBIS for this camera. I like the fixed sensor. It definitely taught me that I don't need IBIS, and I don't actually like IBIS. So, all right, that wraps up my kind of experience on the Canon R8 for about a year on video. Those are all the things that I don't like about it and the things I really do like about it. So like I said, if you're in the market for a camera, you know, about $1,000 for video, I think this camera is really great. I mean, it has features that beat out much more expensive cameras, and yeah, it's pretty low key, and no one, you know, people don't really talk about this camera a ton. But yeah, it's cheap and it's great. So I've had a lot of fun learning cinematography and how to use a camera with this, and I think it's a great beginner video camera that you can get like seriously professional results out of. Not to mention, like, it's a full-fledged photography camera too. Like, you have that whole capability. So yeah, the value on this camera is amazing. I really enjoyed using it. And yeah, that's my thoughts on the Canon R8. I hope you enjoyed. I hope it was helpful. I will see you guys later.